So,
Yay, yay.
yeah,
I love the music, the soundtrack, and I love the photos. Without further ado, Mr. Wyatt Jackson, take it away. Dancing with My Scars, my choice. Take it away.
yeah. So, the book Dancing with the Scars, My Choice is a memoir slash blueprint for what I believe men of color. Now, I wrote this book for men of color in markets like Boston, Roxbury, Dorchester, South Side of Chicago, uh, the Los Angeles South Central area, uh, and also Philadelphia. I could go down the list of the black communities I've been to and have performed in where I met brothers like me who had been through stuff, but who had a positive mindset, right? And I wrote this book for them, for us. And it turns out it went from, like Carole said, it went from zero to number one on Amazon within 2 weeks. And then it went number two to Bruce Springsteen's memoir in 3 weeks. So, in a lot of ways, this book has gone from what I thought it was going to do to something would have never imagined. So let's get into it. I'm going to take you to the next slide. And this is the first chapter is Back to the Future. I had done a DNA test in Ohio, in Miami, Ohio, with Dr. Rick Kittles. Rick Kittles works with Dr. Henry Louis Gates, and they started their contribution to the Genome Project, which is, of course, helping people understand their ancestry. And of course, Dr. Henry Louis Gates has Finding Your Roots, television show on PBS. So went ahead and did the cotton swab, put a little cotton swab in the mouth, and then put the results in the cotton swab in a tube. And the results came back 2 weeks later. 82% sub-Saharan African, 13% European, 5% East Asian. Now, I was clear about, of course, the African, right? Turns out it was from Sierra Leone, Mende tribe. I knew that already. I knew about the Scottish blood, which makes up the European percentage, but I had no idea about the East Asian percentage. And then I found out that most Native Americans, their ancestry comes from East Asia. So that made sense after I did the research. Then I looked into, with that data, I looked into my family's history in Georgia, Madison, Georgia in particular, Kentucky, and Arkansas. And my father's side is from Georgia, my grandfather's side is from Kentucky. My grandmother's side on my mother's side is from Arkansas. So I started to understand more about how my blood went through the slave trade because of what was going on in those states. Then they were able to, my father's side of the family was able to move from Georgia after my great-grandmother, Sabre Jackson, got her degree from Spelman. She was one of the first black women in that first generation, not the first class, first generation of sisters from the early 1900s, late 1900s, to get a degree from Spelman. And she took her family from Georgia and moved up to New Jersey. And from there, the New York, New Jersey area was where my father did his thing, went into the service, and served with the Navy and then with the FBI for a little while, moved to Boston on like a weekend check it out kind of vibe with one of the family friends. Actually, a man who owns New Nile Hair Grease, had a lot of clients in Boston and said to my dad, go check out Boston. I think you'll like it. My father came up and he said, this is where I want to live. So that's the Back to the Future chapter. We can go on to the next slide. Boston, I grew up in a very divided Boston. Not divided in the way it is now. It's more divided now than it was when I was coming up. But you had the Irish that lived in South Boston, clearly. You had African Americans and Jewish who lived in Roxbury. So I have this picture in my head of Black excellence in Roxbury. When I was coming up, Paul Goodnight, uh, Dana Chandler, uh, Elma Lewis, Andrew Herbert Major, all of these arts educators and artists who were people of color were doing their thing. We didn't miss a thing in Roxbury. We had all kinds of activities we could do with the arts. We had Black lawyers, we had Black politicians living in Roxbury. My family knew all those people. We would hang out with heavyweight politicians in Boston, in Roxbury. And as kids, they were just around, and our family knew them. And we knew them from, going to cookouts with them, going over their houses and hanging out. But simultaneously, at the same exact time, you also had Mayor White, who was trying his best to reform Boston, to turn it into a lot like, they say, a lot like Chicago. He wanted it to be like Chicago. But you had opposition from a lot of folks from South Boston, Charlestown, Hyde Park. So there was white anger as well. And when I was coming up at this Pentecostal church, we had a big picture in the lobby of a white Jesus with long hair, blue eyes. And I was extremely confused because I couldn't wrap my mind around what someone said to me in the lobby when I was looking at the picture. The person said to me, "This is Jesus. We're going to live with him forever." And I couldn't wrap my mind around living forever with a white Jesus when white people, in quotes, were the ones who were so angry with Black people. It didn't make sense to me. And I remember as a little kid feeling really confused. And then Mayor White, it just was like, Mayor White, you got a mayor whose last name is White, right? And then white anger, and then a white Jesus. Really threw me off. And it wasn't until I met Dr. Elaine Corey in 1980 was when theater rescued me. It was like she embraced multiculturalism. So when you talk about somebody who was all about multiculturalism, Elaine Corey hired and cast children of color. She cast all different shades of Black and brown and white, you name it. She was brilliant with it, knew how to bring us all together. So I did 7 years with the Boston Youth Theater, and it really changed my life. I was able to bring all that dancing to a space where it made sense with storytelling. She introduced me to some of the most incredible actors that were in my age group. And I hung out with these people and learned from them how to be a storyteller, how to be a storyteller in the purest form, a griot. But I didn't know at the time that I was developing griot sensibilities through theater. But that's what was happening. So theater rescued me from Boston's weird and troubling energy. You can go to the next slide. So I was doing hip hop in Boston. I was doing the Boston Youth Theater. I was doing all these wonderful things. And around 1987, my mother started to exhibit signs that she was sick. And I remember really locking into the arts to just keep my mind focused while I was seeing my mother really deal with her illness. She didn't tell me she had cancer. She just started to get tired a lot and stay home from work, which was not like her. But I was still doing theater. And when she passed, I was at home every day, just sitting near the phone. Didn't know what to do. I was grieving. And my surrogate mother in the arts, Diane Walker, who I met a few years prior, she told me about a show that was auditioning in New York called Body and Soul. And I knew that I wanted to do it, but I just couldn't get myself motivated at the time. And I told her, okay, well, that sounds wonderful. I'll think about it. She called back about maybe 2 or 3 weeks later and said, this show, they really want to see what you can do. Why? They called me and they asked me if I knew of anybody that would be perfect for the show. Well, at the time, I was in this breakdance space where everything was about hip hop and breakdance. So I figured if I'm going to do it, I'm going to audition as a breakdancer, hip hopper, and I'll do some tap dance and I'll do a little bit of the other stuff I know how to do. I went to New York. I auditioned for the show and I got a principal role in one of the biggest black Broadway shows in existence that was going to tour Europe. It was called Body and Soul. And I met George Faison, who is the um, Tony Award winning director, choreographer, you name it, dancer, who has worked with everybody. And he was one of the choreographers for the show. He was the head choreographer for the show. Also, you had Mercedes Ellington, the granddaughter of Duke Ellington, was the tap dance choreographer, and Graciela Danielle, who was a Tony Award winning choreographer on Broadway. These three people worked with me because I had a principal role and I had to work with them and they worked with me on creating these big numbers. And I was, the head of these big numbers that they had created. So I got a chance to work with excellence on another level. And George Faison was at the head of that. That really locked me in to a creative mindset and how to use not just my mind, but my body to create stories. And we're going to talk about that a little later. You can go to the next slide. While I was in Europe touring, so the show was performed in sold out theaters all across Europe. We started off in Germany. We was in Vienna for a while. We were in a lot of different European countries. And we were able to attract like the who's who of Europe. But at the same time, Marcel Avram, who was the promoter for our show, he was the promoter for Michael Jackson's tour at the time and Sting, his tour at the time, and a bunch of other big names. Marcel Avram came to see the show and said to me, I can develop you as an artist. Why don't you all come and see Michael Jackson's performance? I'll give you some tickets to come, you could be my guest. And let's talk about you creating something that I can then promote in Europe. Now, he was the man who discovered Tina Turner when she came back from her time away from the industry. That's the man who did it, Marcel Avram. So I knew about his legendary status, but I figured let me finish up this show, Body and Soul, get back to the States and develop a group and see what we can do. So when I came back, I created a group called Here and Now. And Here and Now was like a vaudeville hip hop group. I would dance and rap, and then a guy named Derek Patterson, he would sing, and then we would dance together. Similar to a 1940s group called Patterson and Jackson. They were two kind of heavyweight tap dancers who sang and cracked jokes, and then they would tap dance with each other, and they would bring the house down. Well, it's interesting that Derek's last name was Patterson, and my last name was Jackson. So we had modeled these two guys from the 1940s in a way, but it was with hip hop. We got a lot of gigs in Boston. We started doing everything, every major act that came through Boston, we opened up for them. And it just turned out that we attracted Michael Douglas, the actor. He had a record label called Third Stone Records on Warner Brothers, and he wanted to sign us. And he signed us to a 7-album deal where we would do soundtracks to movies in Los Angeles, and we would, do our own movie eventually. And we toured. We went to Europe, went to Africa, the Ghana, West Africa. We went to Vienna again. We were all over Europe with this thing, and when we hit Africa, we were in Ghana, and our videos were being played on national television in Ghana through BET. We did BET tours here in America, and then Michael Douglas, interestingly, had a falling out with Warner Brothers, which meant all of his acts that he was working on got cut from the record label, and the group folded because it took so much energy to get us to that point. It would have been really hard to revamp the group, but it was a great experience. Fantastic. We worked with you name it in the 90s, we were on tour with them. Tupac, Snoop Dogg, Brian McKnight, TLC. I could go down the list of the artists that we were partnered with on promotional tours. And that was that season. It was fantastic. We'll go on to the next slide. As a result of the group folding, and because I was at Bethel AME Church, started attending Bethel in 1991, the group came out in 93. When it folded, it was 95. I had a lot of time on my hands to think about what I was going to do with the rest of my life. And the dance was there for me. I've always been attracted, of course, to modern dance and African dance. But when I joined Bethel, turns out our pastor, Pastor Ray Hammond, went through some of the same channels that I went through in dance. He was a student at the Alma Lewis School of Fine Arts, just like me. He studied modern dance in Philadelphia, just like I did in Boston. He knew Judith Jamison, and he knew a lot of the people that I knew in the arts, he also worked with. So he had introduced me to, this idea of, hey man, if you want to worship through dance here at the church, you can do it. You can do that. You get the space to do it. And we had a dance ministry. A bunch of us were together in a prior relationship. I was dancing with her, and there was a lot going on with dance at Bethel. People came and left, but there was still dance, always dance, because the pastors believed in how powerful dance could be as a form of worship. So I met Pastor Hammond's mentor through that practice, Bishop John Bryant, and his wife, the late Reverend Dr. Cecilia Bryant. And they said to me, we need you to go basically on tour with us to these conferences that we have. I went everywhere with them: Chicago, Texas, Houston, Texas, Birmingham, Alabama, Washington, D.C., Fort Washington, Maryland. I could go down the list. It's about maybe 9 places that I went with them. And these weren't small conferences. These were big conferences with thousands of people attending. And I would always get picked up at the airport by a chauffeur-driven or some kind of fancy thing that would put me in the highest quality hotels. They would give me a love offering that I could pay my rent on. I mean, it was amazing. And we went everywhere together. And then Tamar Bryant, Reverend Dr. Tamar Bryant, we became like brother and sister. And we went everywhere doing stuff together. Then Jamal Bryant called me and said, man, look, I'm starting a church in Baltimore. I need you to come and do some things with me. So we worked together for a season. And the list goes on and on with the Bryants. I could talk about them for a whole hour of things I've done with the Bryants. But this was confirmation to me that I was on the right path, because in the AME Church, the rich history of the AME Church, praise and worship has always been at the center of the creative, of course, expression of us as people of color. And the AME Church embraced a whole new generation of praise and worship leaders. And the Bryants considered me one of those leaders. And they kept bringing me along and saying, I want you to lead this. I have one quick story about something that Bishop Bryant asked me to do. We get to Chicago, and Bishop Bryant said, look, my wife wants you to do something with us pastors and bishops, um, a dance of some sort. Would you be interested? I said, sure. I thought it was going to be like maybe 6 or 7 people. Turns out it was 45 bishops and pastors all wearing garments. When I walked in the room to work with these brothers, they were all wearing garments that they could dance in. And I had to come up with the music, I had to come up with the choreography. Now, Pastor Hammond was there, and he didn't uh, engage in the dance because he wanted to take video of it. It was that spectacular. But Bishop Brian, all these bishops and pastors were dancing together in Chicago for a huge conference. And it was like one of those things that I'll never forget. Powerful. So you're talking about dancing before the Lord. That's exactly what that was. You can go on to the next slide. So once I got my flow going with dance in the church, I also stayed connected to the Broadway scene. And I'm a big believer that you worship the Lord at church, and you sing or dance or whatever. You should be able to go into the market and do what you do, full out, high quality, top quality as well. So I was in a show called Black and Blue that went to Paris and Berlin. Was there for 6 months or 3 to 6 months, and we performed at a theater in Paris called the Châtelet Theater, right next to Notre Dame. Diane Walker had hooked me up with that. She was in the Broadway version of that show. And I really locked into Black musical theater. That's when all of what I had learned from Elma Lewis and from Diane Walker herself and Andrea Major and George Faison and you name it, all the people who poured into me, this show gave me a strong sense of how powerful Black musical theater can be. I felt like I was touring Harlem, like Harlem was going with me. Uh, and then I started studying the Harlem Renaissance, studying the New Negro Renaissance, going deep into the poetry, the music, the dance, the richness of the relationship. Zora Neale Hurston, Langston Hughes, Alain Locke, who wrote the book, The New Negro. I went deep. I mean, I went deep into the history. So when I came back from that tour in Europe with Black and Blue, I felt equipped to do anything in the arts. Now, the person who put the show together was from Argentina. His name was Claudio Segovia. Claudio Segovia also knew that I was a hip hop artist. And right after Black and Blue, he asked me to come to New York and help him develop a Broadway show about hip hop. We had a few meetings about it, and he said, honestly, I would love to do it right now, but hip hop is still too young. It needs to be about 70 to 80 years old before I can touch it. At the time, hip hop was entering into its 45th year or so. And he likes to take old cultural expression like the Harlem Renaissance and so on. And he likes to revive, like bring it to life again, that kind of thing. So he felt that once he did his research with me and with some other hip hoppers that I introduced him to in New York, he felt that hip hop was still young. It was still in its teenage years, not his infancy, but his teenage years. And so around now is when he would want to probably produce it, but he just passed away last year. So that all came out of my experience with Black and Blue. Next slide. So many years after the Black and Blue experience, I went through a huge change. A marriage of 15 years ended. I moved to Georgia to start my life over since my family was from there originally. I felt that Atlanta would be a good place to start over. Knew some folks down there, knew the sister that I was in a relationship with. And I realized that Atlanta is a lot like Boston in a way. You have to have deep roots in that state and network really well in order to do well there. like I had done here. Um, so I came back after a year of living in Georgia and completely locked in and connected to my network again after leaving it for a year. And one of the things I connected with was the trauma healing community through Reverend Liz Walker. Now, she was at Bethel as an assistant to Pastor Gloria with, pastoring or being a reverend and so on. And then they would do stuff in Sudan, Africa. They were doing a lot of missionary work there. And then she got an assignment to be an interim pastor at the Roxbury Presbyterian Church. Well, just when she got that assignment, a young man by the name of Corey Johnson, who was a member of the church, had gotten killed, gotten murdered by, they still haven't found the person. And the family of Corey Johnson, the Fitzpatrick family, they were grieving. They went through all of the steps of grieving. And so Reverend Walker felt that she should do something more than just candlelight vigils or, linking them up with peace marches and so on. She figured, why don't I bring the family together with other grieving families and let's do a night of sharing our stories of trauma and grief. She calls me up and says, Wyatt, I'm doing this thing at the church. Would you want to dance for it? It's about people who are healing from trauma, from gun violence and so on. And I would like for you to dance in between the stories that they share. I said, sure, I'll come on down. Well, the first week we did it, it was like all crying. It was like the dance happened and it was just tears. She asked me, can you come back again next week? Came back the next week and the next week and the next week. And before I knew it, Reverend Liz and I were building out youth programs that were helping young people deal with trauma. And then she started hiring psychiatrists and psychologists to come in, and we built out a whole network called the Can We Talk Network. And it started in the church basement at Roxbury Pres, and then it spread around Boston to different locations. Then it spread throughout the East Coast, and now it is in 20 different locations throughout the country. And it's about bringing people together to share stories of loss, of trauma, you name it. You could bring any story that's a hard story to tell, and we listen to you. We don't try to fix you. We don't try to help you. We just give you the space to think and process. So this was important, really important. So much so, I could go into more detail, but let's move on to the next slide. This one is important to me. Now I'm going to detail this one. Around that time, I was going to Bethel, and every so often, my now lovely wife, Marcia, she was the church school superintendent of Bethel AME Church at the time. She would ask, just being like ministry based, she would ask me to help her with different things that were going on. Like one time, a van needed to be driven with a bunch of folks to go to a space downtown. She asked me if I could do it, no problem. Someone had canceled on doing Bible study for youth. She called me that morning and asked, could you do it? I said, sure, no problem. Came and did it. And that was that. Now, at the same time, I was checking out this documentary about Jamaica, and I fell in love with this documentary about Jamaica. And it was like something I had to keep watching. I must have watched it like 9 times. And it was always in the back of my head to watch it every so often when I had nothing to do and I wanted to really just stay locked into the love and beauty of Jamaica and the culture. I would watch this documentary. Well, Marcia and I were doing these different things together with church. And then one day, I just saw her differently. It was like I became attracted to her. And I told her, I said, I just told her, I said, I'm attracted to you. And she blushed and she said, no, she thought I was weird, and now looking back, I understand why she thought that, because I was eccentric and I still am, right? But she and I started dating. And the dates started to have more frequency. And her friends started noticing that she would say more about me. My friends, I could go down the list of the brothers who would say, man, what are we doing later on today? Because we always hung out. And I started saying with more frequency, oh, I'm spending time with Marcia. We're going to do different things. And I tell people, whenever people ask me, so how did y'all hook up? I tell them that she represented every positive thing that I wanted for my life going forward as a man who had 10 years of consistent therapy about what is most important in life. Her love for her country, her love for her family meant everything to me. And I saw in her the kind of sisterhood, her friends, how she loves on her friends and how her friends love on her, positive, uh, all these positive things that Marcia is about. That represented what I really wanted, like specifically what I wanted. And and we knew that it was something to do to get married. And we courted for 2 years and got all kinds of premarital counseling from, of course, the late um, Reverend Tyson and his wife. The Tysons, we sat at the table, as they would say with people, and we worked through the stuff that people need to work through when they're serious about coming together. And I'm just thankful to say she really is my true north, love. And it means everything for me to say that, because I know it's true and it's real for me. And this is it. I'm getting up there in age, and I'm like fine wine. I know what I want, and I know how sweet I am as far as what I got going on. And I wanted to make sure that I was connected to someone who understood how to love and how to receive my love. And that's exactly what's happening with us. And I am super grateful. Let's move on. So, in that love flow, there was also a lot of brotherhood that came alongside. My brother, Robbie Thomas, who I was roommates with before I married Marcia, he married a woman named Anita, who is a singer and a corporate executive, former corporate executive from from the West Coast area, excuse me. And then Marcia and I got married, but Robbie and I were talking about how we could do something with the art that we have. He's a poet, has 3 books that he's published. And then he kept reminding me, man, you've done all this stuff on Broadway and in Europe. Let's work on something. So from the loss that he and I both shared in different relationships, we saw the blessing of what we were now experiencing, and we figured, let's do something. We meet up with them in Las Vegas, where they live, and we sat at the poolside and had a long conversation about what we could do together. And out of that conversation came We Move in Color. I originally wanted to include my cousin on my father's side, Benny Andrews, the late Benny Andrews, who is a visual artist, who was the first man of color to have his work featured in the Museum of Modern Art. And I knew that this was a legacy piece for me. I could feel it. So I went to Paul Goodnight and I asked him if he wanted to be a part of this production. And he said, if you're going to include Benny Andrews' work, well, count me in, because he was my mentor. And he came alongside and created a piece for us specific to the show. We premiered the show in 2022 at the Strand Theater. And folks from the Kennedy Center were there in the audience, and they told us prior to the show, let's look at bringing you to the Kennedy Center. And then after the show, they said, absolutely. We did two appearances at the Kennedy Center, one year and then one right after that the next year. And so now we have this production. And I can say that the book, Dancing with the Scars, My Choice, it ends with this chapter, We Move in Color. And I can say that this is, in a lot of ways, the culmination of many years of thinking positive, staying positive, and dancing in the positive. As we say in the Christian circles, dance in the light, right? Sing in the light. Whatever you do, keep it in the light. And so that's the end of that slide presentation. But the most important thing I can say about all of this is that you have to do three things. This is my motto. I've been saying it now for 3 years. Organize your story, organize your work, and do it with a positive mental attitude.